What is up guys, Andy Forest Steam Runner here. Welcome back to another video, and today we're talking all about the Puma DEVIATE Nitro and their first impressions. So there we go, 2 runs done and dusted in the Puma DEVIATE Nitro, here today to give you guys my first impressions of this shoe. So many of you guys recommended this thing. I'm excited to get it into the shoe rotation. Second Puma shoe of the year here to test out for you guys. If you're excited for today's video guys, make sure you give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content. And before we get into my thoughts, we'll kickstart with the tech. So we'll kickstart by saying I went true to size in this shoe. I'm a UK size 13. That's exactly what I purchased with my money in this shoe, and it fits absolutely perfectly. In terms of stack height, I'm not 100% sure. Puma don't clarify it on their website, and I've seen some reputable sources on the internet clashing a little bit as to what they think it is. I've seen a few that are saying it's 38mm stack in the heel, 28 in the forefoot, meaning a 10mm heel to toe drop. I've also seen 32 in the heel, 24 in the forefoot, meaning an 8mm heel to toe drop. So I'm going to lean towards the 38-28 because that's kind of a little bit more what it feels like, and this definitely does not look like 24mm of stack in the forefoot. So that's what we'll go with, in and around 38 to 28 10mm heel to toe drop. And in my UK size 13 it comes in at 11.9 ounces or 337 grams. And as always, we'll roll our way through from the heel counter area, talk about the tongue, the lacing, the upper. We'll shift our attention to that midsole and then talk finally about the outsole. So in and around this heel counter area, we have a bit of a TPU piece at the back here to give you a little bit of stability in the heel, and we have some bumper padding cushioning either side of the ankles, or just underneath the ankle bone I should say. You can actually see the silhouette of it here. It's a good amount of padding, just enough, but the rest of the material in and around it is absolutely paper thin, and nothing down the back of the Achilles, no padding there. So that is very reminiscent of that bumper padding that you see in the Vaporfly Next Percent. A very flexible heel counter that does go back down, but does also have a little bit of spring back, so it's not completely loose and unsupportive, because that TPU area gives a little bit of support, but there is a bit of flexibility there. And unlike the Liberate Nitro, where I had to cut a little bit out of here because it cuts in a bit too much into the Achilles, I did not have to do that in that shoe. So moving on to the tongue, we have a well padded tongue, thin, but again you can see here paper thin at the top, and then about a centimetre down we kick into some padding, which again is basically where the laces sit over the top of your foot to give you that cushioning, and that's nice. And it is indeed a gusseted tongue attaching on the lateral and the medial side with some elastic shown by the overlay, so that's good. You get a nice secure lockdown fit. In terms of the lacing, we have a standard lacing system, which is actually quite wide. The laces, as you saw in some of the footage and some of the overlays, the lacing is actually quite wide, and that works really well for my foot because my foot has quite a bit of volume, so I'm able to get a really nice lockdown feel in this shoe, and I don't have to over cinch them together, so it works really well. It is a standard lacing system with eyelets down either side, nothing fancy, no fun and games. It is what it is, and it does the job nicely. We then have a lightweight, breathable, engineered mesh upper, which I've got to say is very lightweight, and at points you can see right through it. In fact, I can see right through it around this area and this area here. It goes straight through, and again, works really well. I'm running it in quite hot conditions at the moment, 19, 20, 21 degrees. And my feet are staying relatively nice and cool. They're not overheating, put it that way. So again, that's good. And we've got some lamination there of some of the Puma logo here and there, and that's about it for the upper. In terms of the midsole, we have the nitrogen infused midsole that Puma have been using. Very, very nice. You know, I love nitrogen infused midsoles from the Brooks Hyperion Tempo. It's great, gives that perfect combination of sort of supportiveness and sort of firmness, but also it's not too firm. You get a good bounce of it as well. It literally sits in the middle of not too soft, not too firm. It's that perfect amount. That coupled with a carbon fiber plate in this shoe, so a daily trainer providing a carbon fiber plate does provide a more stable ride. And then we do have the Puma grip outsole, which is predominantly at the top here and then around the heel, and you can see by this cutout here, that's exactly where the carbon plate is. So that's the shoe from a tech perspective. So what have we done in this shoe and how did I find it? What are my first impressions? Well, so far we've done an easy run and we've done a moderate run. I did an hour and 10 minutes easy and then I did a 60-minute moderate run. So two contrasting paces. I wanted to do, actually it's kind of the way testing's been going lately, not for any other reason than just video schedule and when I can get things out. So I actually was able to put a couple of runs in this thing before giving you my thoughts. And I'm actually glad, this has happened with a couple of shoes, I'm actually glad I was able to do that because the shoe was slightly underwhelming at first, and I'm not going to lie, I'm still slightly underwhelmed with it now, but it did do better on the moderate run. So let's dive into why I feel that way, what it reminds me of, and really how I felt about the shoe on the run. When I took it out for its easy pace, it's a little bit, it's baffling me, the whole carbon plated shoe in a daily trainer, carbon plate in a daily trainer. It's just a really weird concept, and I understand that it sort of provides a bit of stability and energy return and all of that stuff, but my thoughts on carbon plated shoes really are that you save them for some really hard, good training runs that you really want to nail, and then race day, you know. And I do also feel like with carbon plated shoes, they take away your natural gait cycle. Naturally, when you land, you want to kind of, if this was your right foot, you want to kind of land on your pinky toe, kind of roll through and push off on your big toe, and get all those metatarsals working and get your feet working. And naturally, a carbon plate sort of takes it away. It's a very rigid feeling. You land and you roll, and your toes and the grip and the muscles in them don't work in the same way that maybe something like the Liberate does, which is a very flat profile shoe. There's no curve, there's no meta rocker. You literally land and your foot does all the work to get you going again. So in terms of a daily trainer, it's just a little bit of a strange concept. So when I'm running easy in a carbon plated shoe, it does feel a little bit odd. But when I took it for a moderate run, I did kind of feel a little bit more like this is where I was meant to be. And actually, to be fair, it was the quickest moderate run I'd done, 6:32 per mile at the lowest heart rate, 150 beats a minute. Normally I'm around 6:40 per mile and 152, 153. And I know fitness is going to be playing a part in that, but I can't help but think that the energy return and the carbon plate and things like that is going to be helping that. So I've got to give credit where credit's due. I think this shoe did play some hand in that run. Now, it's comfortable and I enjoy the comfort feeling, but again, if you guys watch and pay attention to my channel, you know that I predominantly run on fire road trails, very flat, buffed out, rarely any gravel, just flat, buffed out trails. I take all my road shoes on there. Even the Next Percent, I've done a 20-mile long run out on the trails in them for some testing, because it really is not that much different from testing it on tarmac. Yes, a little bit less grip and that sort of thing, and not as much traction, but on the whole, there's no big rocks to go over. It's very flat, and I did find this thing struggled out there a little bit. Obviously, I'm going to be doing a lot of running out there, and this thing, it just felt a little bit awkward. Obviously, with carbon plates, there's no give, so if you do go over any kind of uneven terrain, your whole foot and ankle does rock side to side. Your shoe doesn't mold around. So again, if you've got weak ankles, something like this might not be ideal to run on that sort of surface, even if it's concrete but a little bit uneven, you know what I mean? The lockdown around this heel section area wasn't the best. My heel towards the end of each run did feel a little bit loose, and ankle area did start to feel loose and wobble a little bit in here. So I didn't feel like, although over the top it was nice and cinched down, I did have a lot of movement in and around the back here. And I wore thick socks on the first one, easy run, and I got no blisters. I wore very thin socks on the second run, which is the footage you just saw, and I did get a slight bit of rubbing. So although I don't need to cut that away, I know I just need to wear thicker socks with this shoe. But in terms of overall how the shoe performed, yeah, it was really good. There was nothing wrong with it. I tell you what, it also felt, it just felt a little bit heavy. So this comes in at about 8 grams lighter than the Nova Blast, but this feels a lot heavier. It feels bottom heavy, and I tell you what it reminds me of. It reminds me of the Zoom Fly 3, which is a shoe that had a lovely upper but felt very bottom heavy with all of that React in the carbon plate. This kind of feels a little bit similar. It does feel very bottom heavy. It does feel like when you're running, you're really having to pull a weight off the ground. Whereas if you're running something like the Nova Blast, you've got that sink and bounce sensation. The propulsion of that shoe almost dissipates some of that weight that you've got there, if that makes sense. Whereas this, you feel all of the weight and you feel it a little bit more. So this kind of feels a little bit more of a Hoka gliding sensation. There's no sink and bounce in this. You really do feel glide, which is a sensation that I love. But with the weight in it, I feel like Hoka have got that weight balance nailed down to a T. Even in the Carbon X2, which is a shoe I wasn't a massive fan of, it still feels lighter than this thing. And I think this is slightly lighter than the Carbon X2. So it feels like a bit of a heavier Hoka, and a shoe that I'm just a little bit baffled by. How am I going to use it moving forward? Well, I'm going to take it to 100 miles for sure. I'm just not going to be using it that much regularly because I don't like to use carbon plated shoes that much on a weekly basis. I try and reserve it for just once a week. So it might take us a little bit of a while to get there, but I think I'm definitely not going to be using it on easy runs. I will probably end up using it on moderate runs, maybe a long run, who knows. I'm kind of put off a little bit from a long run perspective just because I'm going to be doing them out on the flat trails, and it just feels a little bit awkward out there. So moderate stuff is probably where this thing is going to come into play, a little bit like what I'm using the Mach 4 for and some of the Nova Blast and stuff like that. So yeah, that was a long waffle, wasn't it? But hopefully that explains my position with this shoe. A good shoe, don't get me wrong, a good shoe, but a little bit weird, a little bit just kind of feels a little bit all over the place, doesn't feel quite as dialed in. Complete contrast to the Liberate, which is so simple, stripped back and beautiful. This thing feels like it's just overcomplicating it a little bit. And as I said, carbon plate in a daily trainer, I'm just not sold on the idea, but we'll see how it goes over the 100-mile mark. So I've probably disappointed a ton of you because loads of you have recommended this thing to me. I would love to know how you feel about this shoe. I would love to know in the comments below if you agree with anything I've said, if you completely disagree. I'm sure there'll be a lot of disagreements in this one, and that's fine. That's what it's all about. These are all opinions, and I'd love to hear your opinion. So that's my first impressions on the Puma Deviate Nitro. Let me know in the comments below what yours are, and if you enjoyed today's video, guys, make sure you give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Until then.